Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Force here with another deck spotlight. Today we will be taking a look at a low mana Warlock Swarm deck, which I found very interesting for a couple of reasons. Number one, this deck supposedly has over a 75% win ratio in Masters, but it's also a very inexpensive deck and something with only a handful of rares that will be easily attainable to new players to the game. So the deck itself relies on a few low mana creatures such as Blood Imp and Razorfen Hunter, some minion buffers like the Raid Leader and Direwolf Alpha, and then finally some removal to push your creatures through in the early to mid game like Soulfire and Shadowbolt. Now with the general concept out of the way, let's go ahead and take a look at the deck in action.
Gul'dan versus Jaina.
So this deck was posted up on Hearthstone by a gentleman by the name of VTX Aishi, and it supposedly has an 88% win ratio, which honestly is kind of crazy if you ask me. That's a little bit of a ridiculous win ratio to have, especially in a deck that has so little rares, but evidently is also so very effective. So I'm really excited to show you guys this deck. We'll see how this game goes. Our opening hand isn't actually that great because we don't have any of our turn 1 drops. It would have been amazing if we went second, because we would have been able to coin into Succubus, which is kind of crazy to get a 4-3 out on your first turn. But alas, that did not happen. I think we're still going to do this nice and early, though. Let's see what we end up losing. Unfortunately, it was the Raid Leader. I was kind of hoping it was going to be the Shadowbolt or the Soulfire. But nevertheless, we've got a 4-3 in play now, which he has to deal with. He might have the necessary burn for it. Looks like he's going to ping it for 1. And he might be killing it next turn with some removal. Or he might have to wait a couple turns. In which case, I'm kind of happy because, hey, we're hitting him hard. We're gonna go with the Flame Imp right now. We'll take some damage. Go ahead and life tap it up because we don't mind taking some damage of our own. Since we're trying to, you know, with any swarm deck, any aggro deck, we're planning on killing them in the early to mid game. So taking a little bit of damage in the process isn't that big of a concern for us because we're hopefully planning to outpace them in terms of the damage. Now he's got a few things to be concerned about here. He does have some removal for our creatures. In fact, he could potentially clear our board next turn. So what I'm thinking here, this might seem like kind of a waste, but I don't want him to completely take my stuff out next turn. This is kind of interesting. I'm really thinking about popping off one of his creatures here with this. But then if we trade that, yeah, I'll make him attack into it. So we're actually going to get rid of that. So he hopefully can only get rid of one of our guys next turn. We're going to do another Flame Imp, and then I'm going to hit him here. So that was, you know, using a Shadowbolt on something with that little health. Normally it's like, do you really want to do that? But the thing was, I was worried about him popping through my creatures. So now he's going to only be able to remove one of them instead of being able to remove both of them. And again, we're going for the race here. We're trying to beat him to the finish line. Oh, you know what? We can if we Mortal Coil that, it won't finish him off. We'll end up losing one of our guys. I might even Soulfire him, actually. Yuck. But you know what? I mean, this is the sort of thing that this deck... well, before I do that, I want to make sure we get this in play. And then we're going to Soulfire him. Get him out of the way. Push our guys through. And we ended up losing the Mortal Coil. But this is what we're trying to do. He's down to 13 health right now. So he's going to need some AoE, which he can certainly have. There's a few different options that he could have here. But if he doesn't, okay. This is going very well for us, actually. Well, he's at 15, so we're going to be able to do 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 damage right now, which will bring him down to 5. Oh boy. Oh boy. Let's go ahead and life tap it up, see what we get, and there is the win. What a perfect example of how this deck is supposed to work. I think this was literally the ideal way to show you guys this deck. We swarmed him early, we dealt with some of his early game threats, and we finished him off just like that. Kind of ridiculous, and now I'm not all that surprised at the claim that this deck has an 88% win ratio in Masters, because that was silly. Let's go ahead and wrap things up by taking a look at the deck list. Starting off, we've got some spot removal or a finisher in the Soulfire for 4 damage, 0 cost, and discarding a card at random. Mortal Coil, nice for picking off some creatures early game and getting to draw a card if you finish them off with it. Power Overwhelming, just like the Soulfire, good as a finisher or good for picking off high health creatures, taunters, things of that nature. The Blood Imp, because you've got so many creatures in play, having that extra 1 health can really help them survive. And another thing that I think makes Warlock, aggro, and swarm decks especially effective is that giving your minions that extra health helps deal with mass damage, such as things like Fan of Knives, Cone of Cold, Arcane Explosion, things like that. That really helps a lot with that. We've got the Flame Imp, an amazing turn 1 drop. You don't mind taking the 2 damage because you plan on killing them early in the game anyways, so taking a little bit of damage isn't a big deal with this deck. The same reason we're freely life tapping. The Voidwalker, nice early creature, nice to have a taunt as well. Direwolf Alpha, because it pumps up our creatures. Ironbeak Owl to silence threatening creatures or things with taunt. The Novice Engineer, nice creature plus the card draw. Succubus, same thing with the Flame Imp. Sure, it's got its drawback, but it's a nice beefy creature super early in the game. Especially if you go second with the coin, you can drop this on your first turn. Kind of crazy to get a 4/3 out that early. Shadow Bolts for spot minion removal. Harvest Golem because it's a 2/3, nice beefy early game creature that comes back as a 2/1 when it dies. 2 of the raid leaders to pump up your other creatures. 2 Razorfen Hunters. It's a token creature. It's the same reason we've got the Dragonling Mechanic. Helps us fill the board up. Plus pump ups through the things like raid leader can make for some massive damage. We have one of the Shattered Sun Cleric to pump up a specific minion. The Void Terror, this is one of the few actual late game cards destroying minions on either side and pumping him up. He can actually get pretty ridiculous in terms of his power and toughness, even in this deck with so many small power and toughness creatures. Defender of Argus, nice to have that extra thing of taunt, plus the extra +1s are really nice. Then we've got, again, we talked about the Dragonling Mechanic, the nice token minion summon. Frostwolf Warlord, one of the other late game creatures here, just like the Void Terror, can be fairly beefy, especially with such a massive amount of minions on the board. And then finally we've got a Siphon Soul for spot removal and a little bit of extra health to help offset the damage you're taking from all of the life tapping. So there you go, guys. A very effective deck. We're going to take it through its paces to see how we perform in this with this deck in Masters League. But again, according to the guy who posted this deck, it's got an 88% win ratio. So I'm looking forward to seeing how it does. All right, thanks so much for watching. Stay tuned for the paces video following up this one. Thanks so much, guys. More Hearthstone coverage coming right up. If you like the content, please subscribe, keep watching, and keep owning.